Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host Keith Berkelhamer, and tonight we got something different going on here. Let me tell you, first of all, we're doing the show in front of one of my fish tanks, so that's pretty cool. Second of all, my wife is actually running the live stream, and I have no idea if we're even actually on the air on YouTube, so that's pretty interesting. Thirdly, got the dog down here, and hopefully he's not going to pull a cord out of the camera. And fourth, I got my buddy Dr. Rob Williams here, who's actually going to be hosting the show. I'm going to be turning it over to Rob, and I'm going to be the guest. But before we do that, well, Rob, welcome to the show here, and welcome to the ReefBum Den.
Keith, this is so cool to see and hear what you got going on.
Right. I mean, a lot of you viewers are probably subscribers to my channel, so. And you've seen the tanks, but yeah, for those of you that don't know what my tanks are all about, you could actually catch a live webcam of this tank on YouTube to get some great footage of that reef tank. But this is really cool, Rob. I mean, it's interesting because Rob and I met when I was running MRV TV, which is Man River Valley Television, the public access TV station here in Vermont, and Rob was on the board. You're still on the board, right?
I'm still on the board.
You're still on the board.
Yeah.
But Rob's a very, very interesting guy. He has a lot of projects going on. Rob, I don't know, you want to explain some of the projects you got going on in your life?
I'll be brief. I'm a university professor, a newspaper publisher, a musician, and I'm just about to launch a breathwork company called Peak Flow. And like most Vermonters, I wear many hats, happily. And it's so fantastic to be in the cave, or maybe the grotto of the reef bum. Yeah, it's just so cool. So cool.
So, what did I want to say? So this is what's going to go down. Rob has a program called Plan V TV on MRV TV. And he is going to actually do an episode during this live stream. And I'm going to be his guest. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, everybody here?
Makes sense to me. Wilson, you got that?
And the dog is poking his head between us here.
He's ready. He's ready.
So yeah, we're gonna try this, and so as always, for you folks out there watching live, please comment, please ask questions in the chat. We're monitoring the chat. I can see some familiar faces already in the live stream, and we will try to incorporate some of those comments and questions, perhaps. But it's up to Rob, because Rob is running the show. When I pass along the baton, I don't know, maybe we should call it Rappin With Rob.
Rappin With Rob. I'm down.
But before I hand it off, Rob, I do want to take care of a little bit of business and thank my sponsors for Rappin With ReefBum, Bulk Reef Supply, and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate their support, and I also really appreciate the support of all you viewers out there. And with that said, Rob, the show is being handed over to you. So take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks to the sponsors. So welcome to Plan V TV, the show about Vermont independence. I'm Dr. Rob Williams, the publisher of VermontIndependent.net, and with us, remote and in the ReefBum Grotto tonight, we have my dear friend, Keith Berkelhamer, who's going to show us how to throw it down with the fish. So great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
So
I'm just really psyched to have you down here.
Amazing.
I mean, you know nothing about really saltwater reef tanks, right? And
everything I know, I've learned from you in conversation. But to be in the ReefBum Grotto is really, really powerful. So can we start with a question I always ask everyone on the Plan V TV show? And this may be a question that your ReefBum audience does not know. How did you find your way here to Vermont?
That's an interesting story. We had, my wife and I, Ginger, and our daughter had been vacationing in Vermont for many, many years, and we were, skiers. And we would come up for like a week during the holidays, Christmas week. We started out skiing down at Mount Snow. We kind of moved a little bit further up north and started skiing Stratton, not much further north.
No.
And then we discovered the valley. I had a friend who talked a lot about Sugarbush in terms of skiing here, and a cousin of mine, he and his wife skied Mount River Glen a lot. So they were folks that just were in love with the area. So we just decided to take the next step up the Route 100 and visit the Mount River Valley, and we just fell in love with it. And we soon thereafter we bought a condo, and so we had that to come up on weekends. I was working a pretty brutal job in terms of commuting to the city. I spent 26 years in the media business in New York City, commuting back and forth, first in Westchester County, New York.
Where I grew up.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. We have that in common.
We do.
I grew up there too.
Yeah.
And so that was a tough commute in itself, and I did that for a long time. And then we had our daughter, and we were living in the city. We were actually living at the time in New York City. So I had a nice short commute then.
Yes.
And we so she was about 6 months old, and at that point in time, I was like, you know what? I think we gotta go to the burbs, go to the suburbs. So we moved out to Westchester, and then eventually we moved to Connecticut. I had a 4-hour round trip commute to the office for about 10 years.
Were you riding the train in from Stamford? Am I remembering that correctly, or was it further out?
It was a station called Golden's Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
So right above Katona.
Well, yeah, Mount Kisco and Katona. Sure. Yeah. I drive by there often.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
And so we had an opportunity. Life kind of changed a little bit, and my work situation, it was kind of like winding down in terms of the corporate world. So we just decided to go for it and do a lifestyle change, better work-life balance for me, and just decided to move up here full time.
Thank God. Yeah. So glad you did. And we had many fantastic years together working on MRV TV, the Mad River Valley TV project. And I remember one day coming into the TV studio, having gotten the news that you were going to be moving on, which made me sad, of course. And I said, well, Keith, what are you going to be doing? And you said, and I'll never forget these words, I'm going to actually build my aquarium business. It's like your aquarium business. And I remember thinking,
What the hell's he talking about?
that's a thing. And of course, I have proceeded to be enlightened upon the pinnacle, or in the aquarium, as it were. Yeah, so the aquarium industry, I hate to call it an industry because the fish are so beautiful, but the aquarium scene, shall we say, is incredibly robust.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm hoping we can unpack that over the next little bit tonight, because unlike probably many of your viewers, I know a little bit about tropical fish and aquariums, but not much. So now that we have established how you got here, how did you get into aquariums and tropical fish?
It was something that I did, when I was a kid. My father kept fish-only saltwater fish tanks, and so I used to go to local fish stores with him and check out the fish, and so it just kind of got ingrained in my system that way.
Love it. And was this in New York?
Westchester County, in Armonk.
Oh, in Armonk. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
That's like 3 towns from where I grew up. I love it. So you and your dad would go to the fish store?
Yeah, and he kept tanks for many years, and then when Ginger and I moved into the city together in our first apartment, I started out with like a 29-gallon saltwater. Actually, it was first a 2-gallon goldfish tank that I won. I won these goldfish at the San Gennaro Festival in New York City.
Nice.
And I just felt like I needed to go out and buy a home for these goldfish.
These fish, yes.
So it was a 2-gallon, goldfish little tank. That eventually turned into a 29-gallon, freshwater planted tank, which turned into a 90-gallon reef tank, and that was in the city. So that was really interesting. And then we moved to Westchester, and I got a 120-gallon tank, and then it morphed into a 225-gallon tank.
Oh my gosh!
Now I've got 6 tanks.
So just for my benefit, probably not for your viewers are educated already, but the tank that is behind us, this beautiful tank full of these amazing coral and these colorful fish, how big is that tank?
That's 187 gallons.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, I need to scale it in my brain.
Yeah.
So that's 187 gallon. So the tank that you actually were talking about is actually bigger than that one.
Yes, that's 5 foot long by 30 inches wide by 24 inches tall, and the old one was 6 foot long by 30 inches wide by 24 inches tall. So that was a foot longer than that one.
Okay. So just to put that into perspective, I'm 6'1". So I could lie down.
Fit into that.
I could lie down in that tank.
That tank over there, which nobody can see right now.
That is a big tank.
That's a 6 foot long tank.
Yeah. It seems. Is it a little bit less?
Yes, it's not as tall.
More shallow. Yeah,
20 inches.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So these are big tanks.
Yes.
So when you got up to Vermont, did you bring your fish with you?
No, everything was broken down. So the fish, I had to sell the fish, sell the corals. Things were like, basically, I was not in the hobby for like 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was that weird?
It was. I kind of, it was like I was longing for the hobby. I missed it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it was in my blood. And so I just, I just kept counting the days until I could start the tank back up again.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And you're a very outdoorsy person. You're an outdoorsy human. Like every time I see you, if you're not in the TV studio, you're skiing, or you're riding your bike, or you're fishing, right? So it's curious to me that for such an outdoorsy human, you have this really kind of love, passion for these fish that live indoors, live in tanks indoors. Does that ever strike you as interesting?
Yeah, that's why I'm reef bum, because I'm a ski bum.
Yes.
I just love reef tanks. So I'm kind of combining the two things that I love the most.
I love it.
But I'm a big skier, and pretty much try to get out every day during the ski season.
Yeah. Well, I was curious about the name Reef Bum, and you've just answered that question. I love it. So when you got up here and you were kind of settling in, and you were missing the fish and missing the tanks, how did you breathe life back into your Vermont-centric aquarium persona? Like, how did that happen?
I took inspiration from my past tanks, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do with the tank. This whole downstairs that we're in right now was unfinished. So it was, a concrete floor, bare studs, no drywall.
Wow.
And so I just had to have a vision. And for this tank, I really, thought long and hard in terms of where I wanted it to be, because it was like a blank slate down here, which is really cool because I just was able to get very creative. I did not think I would have a second tank down here in addition to this tank. But it, I don't know, man. It's just kind of like organically developed.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, and for folks who may be joining us for the first time or maybe have never gotten the tour, we're in the main room in your basement with 2 beautiful tanks full of stunning fish. And you have a side room as well. Can you talk a little bit about the side room?
Yeah, so the side room is where all the equipment is. So I don't think people could see it in the live stream right here, but actually, Rob, if you moved out of the way,
yes, can I do that?
You could just shift a little bit. You can't see it.
Is that, no? Okay.
There's plumbing through the wall.
Yeah.
So there's really no equipment underneath this tank. I've got a side room with all the equipment, about 15 feet past us, and so all the water drains from the tank into that equipment room. And then I've got pumps that pump it back in from that equipment room back into the tank. So there's a cycle of water that's going on, and it's getting filtered in the other room. And so now I also have this newer Peninsula tank in the same room down here in the basement that has a separate filtration system. And to plumb it, to do all the plumbing work, probably took me a good solid 40 hours of work. And I'm not a plumber. I've just kind of like learned as I've gone.
Yeah.
And you just kind of like learn by doing.
Well, so the analogy that came into my mind as I walked into the auxiliary room, the grow room, is that what you call it?
Yeah, that's where all the grow out room.
So for those who are listening or watching who may be familiar with the hemp or the cannabis industry, which of course is exploding everywhere, certainly in Vermont, I walked into that room and I felt like this is a grow room, but not for cannabis, for fish and for coral.
Well, not fish, just coral.
Just coral.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just coral.
Okay.
Right.
So did I not see any fish in there? I was so enamored with the coral.
The fish in those, they're called frag tanks. So those are the grow out frag tanks. And the fish in there are basically to manage any algae that might pop up on the frag racks. So they're like little workhorses.
I was going to say, are those fish expendable?
I love every fish that I have. So I certainly feel bad that, I got a 75-gallon frag tank and I got a 50-gallon frag tank. I certainly feel bad, that I got a couple of fish in there that are not enjoying the 187 gallons as well as the 225 gallons.
I love that you call it a frag tank. Like what? What is that? Where does that term come from? Do you know?
There's frags. So you put frags in a tank, it's a frag tank.
Love it. I love it. So can we talk about the coral? Because it seems like the business of the aquariums is as much about the coral as it is about the fish. Is that fair?
Some people are really into the fish, and some people are really into the coral, and some people are into really both.
Okay.
And so,
this is amazing.
Yeah, I have, my tanks. I'm what's called a stickhead. So these are Acropora, small polyp stony corals, SPS.
SPS.
And so that's my passion, is the corals and the corals. But the fish are really cool too.
Yeah.
And the fish, make a reef tank look very natural. So that's what it's all about. It's a symbiotic relationship in terms of the fish and the corals.
So I'm learning so many things I didn't know before about aquarium life. So managing an aquarium is as much about growing coral, maybe even more so, than it is about the fish. Depending on
what you're really into. I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, my father, started with fish-only saltwater tanks, and some people, just keep fish only in their tanks. They don't have corals. I mean, keeping corals is a very, complicated thing, and I've been doing it for 27 years, and so I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And it's, it's not easy, especially the SPS and the Acropora. So it can be a very difficult thing to have success, to achieve success with.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge, and I enjoy the challenge.
And you, in those tanks in the other room, in the grow room, I love that term for. They're literally. You mentioned this before, but you're literally growing coral. You used the word splice. Am I remembering this correctly? Can you describe a little bit about how you? And again, I'm sorry if this may not be news for some, but how do you grow coral? What's it?
Yeah, so pretty much what you're doing is you're taking some what are called like bone cutters, and they're stainless steel like pliers.
Okay.
That have a
It's a surgical tool.
yeah, it looks like a surgical tool,
Okay.
and you're basically just snipping off tips. So you're snipping off like a 3/4 inch, a 1 inch, or 1 1/2 inch tip, and you're taking that piece of coral, sticking it on a ceramic plug with super glue, or
You're actually gluing it.
epoxy putty, and you're gluing it to those plugs.
Wow.
And that'll grow into a coral. And so what I do is I'll do that, and then online I have a coral store, and these corals I ship to people across the U.S.
So again, this is not news to some of you, but you can. So if I wanted to get into the aquarium business, I could actually contact you and buy individual coral.
Yeah.
And how would you ship that to me?
It goes overnight in bags in the water via FedEx or UPS.
Amazing.
And typically they arrive in pretty good shape.
And you need to be ready. I would need to be ready. When they arrived, I would have to have.
Yes. Usually next day air is the way to go in the morning so you can get them. But, they could survive a couple of days. Sometimes I've had frags shipped to me that have, FedEx has dropped the ball or UPS has dropped the ball. And they'll be in the box in the bag for a couple of days, and they arrive okay.
That's amazing.
Even fish. I mean, I've gotten, I get all my fish online, and so I order all my fish. They'll, next day air, they come in, but sometimes there's a delay. And you got to feel for the fish.
You don't want to be that fish.
No, you don't want to be that fish.
Yeah. So how many coral varieties are you growing here in the?
I probably have between the two different tanks, maybe 100 different types of SPS coral, hard coral.
Wow.
Yeah, but there are like thousands of varieties out there of different corals. Maybe not that many, but there's a lot of different names for the same type of coral.
So let me channel my inner environmentalist for a minute. There's a film, I'm sure it's well known in your community here, called. There's a film called Chasing Ice, but I'm replacing the word ice with coral. I think of coral reefs as being among the most fragile of the planet's, our beautiful planet, the planet's ecosystems. And yet, what you're telling me here is that you can actually grow your own coral in your basement.
Yes.
In the middle of Vermont, and then ship coral overnight, and it will survive, maybe even longer, to anybody presumably within mailing distance. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, and the good thing is within the trade, there's a lot of what I do is called aquaculture. So you're taking pieces that are aquaculture.
Aquaculture. Okay.
And so you're taking pieces that are already in captivity, and you're fragging those. So you're culturing those fragments of stuff that's already in captivity. So you're not even impacting the wild reefs out there in the in the world. I mean, there is still a lot of wild coral that gets imported, into the trade, and that's been a slippery slope in some countries in terms of exporting the corals. And there's been some closures that have occurred.
Yeah.
But the good thing in terms of what's going on with the hobby, that the part that I'm involved in is that there's a large number of folks that are just growing stuff that's already in captivity. So it's not impacting the wild reefs.
So I never thought of this before, but is it safe to say that you could talk about wild coral out in the natural world versus, would you call this coral domesticated? Homegrown?
I would call it homegrown aquacultured coral.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the question I've been dying to ask you, but I needed to understand kind of a little bit about what's going on in here. It's amazing. So let's kind of zoom out and globally, can you just share a few insights about the global nature of the aquarium industry? Because my understanding, I did some work on another project a few years back. My understanding is it's like a huge community of people. of humans who are involved in this. Can you talk a bit about that?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a hobby that people throughout the entire world are involved with, and I don't know what the numbers are worldwide. I mean, I've heard in the United States that there's maybe 1 million people in the reef keeping hobby.
1 million reef bums?
1 million reef bum? Well,
What do you call yourselves? Those of you who are like aquarium enthusiasts. Like, do you have a
reef
term?
keepers?
Oh, I like that.
Reef keepers. Yeah.
Reef keepers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a powerful term.
Yep.
Okay.
So I think it could be even more popular. And during the pandemic, it became really popular because people had a lot of time to tend to their hobbies. And so I personally became very busy because it was a lot of folks that were staying at home.
I remember that.
That wanted to take care of their tanks and had a lot of time quality time to spend with their tanks. But it's something I get people reaching out to me across throughout the world, and
that's amazing.
It's really kind of cool to be able to connect with people, whether it's through social media or discussion boards or just kind of reaching out via email. It's great, and this was pretty amazing. I wrote a book back in 2017, and it was my kind of like how-to guide in terms of how to keep an SPS reef tank. I had somebody mail me a letter.
Hey, look. Here it is.
I might even have the letter in the...
This is amazing.
in the
This
desk
is
drawer.
called, again, some folks may know this, A Reef Bum's Guide to Keeping an SPS Reef Tank.
There's a letter in the drawer
A
right there.
blueprint for success. This is amazing, Keith.
Do you see a letter in there?
Oh my gosh! And you got.
I got this. I got a letter from some guy in Nepal who wrote me, and I think the letter took maybe. No, my wife is trying to dig out the letter.
It's coming. Yeah.
I think it took like 6 months for the letter to arrive, and the guy reached out to ask me where he can get a copy of my book.
Oh, come on! That's amazing. In Nepal, which is the most mountainous country in the world.
It's like, who has a reef tank in Nepal?
I know.
I thought I was crazy in Vermont to have a reef tank.
With the possible exception of Bhutan. That's so funny.
Yeah.
So this letter arrives months and months after it was sent, and you responded.
I think I did send a response. I can't remember exactly how I communicated, but he left his information and all that stuff.
Amazing.
But
when you can see, again, it's sort of fun to hold up the book and see the tank in the back. I mean, again, my mind is being blown here because I thought it was all about the fish. But you're saying, no, it's not just about the fish. It's actually as much about these beautiful coral. Well, it's so interesting, because human beings, Homo sapiens, we get a lot of flack these days for not caring about the planet and this and that. And what you're telling me is that there are literally millions of humans around the world who are taking the time and money and energy investing in caring for coral and fish in their own homes, which is truly, I hadn't really thought about that before, but that's astonishing. It's amazing.
No, it's amazing. I mean, and across the United States, there are trade shows, conferences that people go to, and I love going to these trade shows. There's one in New Jersey every year that I go to.
Nice.
Called Reefapalooza, which they actually just had one in Chicago, I think it was.
Reefapalooza.
Reefapalooza.
Right.
They have one also in LA and Orlando, I think.
Burning Reef Men.
Yeah. So, I don't know, you get a whole bunch of nerds like me that show up and talk reef. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So can you put I'm just curious because people will ask me, like, annual industry figure, like billions, millions?
I do not know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I do not know the answer to that. But it is a big business.
Yeah, it's not insignificant.
No,
yeah.
no.
So can we talk about fish can we talk about the fish? So the fish, what's going on with the fish? I am an avid snorkeler and scuba diver. It's been a few years living in Vermont. There's not much of that to be had. But I did recognize a number of fish in your tank, the clownfish, right? Everyone's favorite, thanks to the Disney Pixar thing with the Nemo thing. But you have a beautiful variety of colorful tang fish. Yeah, I mean, so what do we need to know about fish?
I'm not an expert at fish there, Rob, but no, I can tell you.
I just
all I can tell you is what I like, And
what do you like? Yeah.
So in this tank back here, I have what are called wrasses in that tank.
Yes, the it looks like there's a speckled wrasse.
Yes, there's a few leopard wrasses in the tank.
Yeah.
My favorite is the Coati leopard wrasse. It's called Choati, I think is how it's spelled.
Ooh,
I'm probably getting that wrong.
Nice.
That fish has actually jumped out of the tank twice. And I know for all you reef keepers that are watching, and I see some comments in the chat there, and hey, Chris from ACI Aquaculture, yeah, coral farming, thanks, dude. Somebody from the UK is watching.
Oh,
yeah.
Hello,
Royal Nano
Hello,
UK.
United Kingdom.
Thanks for watching.
Hello. We're gonna knight some fish for you.
Yeah. So this Coati leopard wrasse jumped out twice. And I'm going to get a lot of grief, I know, for not having a mesh top on this tank.
Right. I wondered about that.
I just can't do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the first time the Coati leopard wrasse leapt out of the tank, I wasn't here.
Well, yeah. So what happened?
So I came down here and I was like, I always take a look at the tank, and the thing was on the floor on the carpet and was actually dried out. I was like, oh, gee, it's like my favorite fish.
Yeah.
So I just picked it up, I put it back in the tank, and lo and behold, it came back to life.
No way.
I don't know how long it was, on the carpet.
That's amazing.
But it, And then the second time I was like, all right, it's learned its lesson. I don't need to put this mesh top on the tank. It's not going to jump again. And then 6 months later, it jumped again. But I was sitting, about 10 feet away, and I just scooped it right up and put it back in.
That's amazing. Wow. Who knew that fish were so resilient? But
we got somebody from Ireland watching too.
Hello.
Josh Muldoon. Thanks for tuning in.
Hello, Josh. It's good to see that the English and the Irish both keep fish. There's hope for the UK yet, right? I love it. So I have to say, seeing your grow room, your auxiliary room, it did look like a tremendous amount of work to plumb that, to string the electrical system. Really, it looks like to my eye, it looks like a very sophisticated operation. So you got 2 tanks here, you got auxiliary tanks there, you've got the fish, which really are intended, it seems to me now, I'm understanding, to basically baby the coral.
Yeah.
Make sure the coral is going. I love that. See, I thought it was all about the fish, but I'm wrong.
No, Rob, to some of us, it's all about the coral. And the fish are a side note.
Yes, I bet there's some people on the live stream who are like, no, it's all about the fish. But, it's helpful to hear that. So I'm curious, like challenges, other than fish jumping out of the tank when you're not home, what are some challenges that you face in this industry?
So keeping a captive reef tank is very challenging. I think the number one challenge for me, and probably a lot of other folks,
I'm just going to hold this up,
are pests. So there's a lot of pests out there that like to eat corals. There's something called acro-eating flatworms that will just munch on the SPS corals.
I hate them already.
There's
what was that?
Acro-eating flatworms, AEWF is the abbreviation for that.
Okay. It has an acronym, of course, yeah.
Monty-eating nudies.
Wow.
They eat Montipora corals.
Oh my gosh.
If you get those in, those are very tough to eradicate.
I suddenly feel like I'm at a rave.
Yeah. There's other type of flatworms. There's problematic algae that pops up called one big thing that I've had in a couple of my tanks is called dinoflagellates. It's like an algae, but it's like a bacteria. I think technically it's a bacteria.
Yeah. I've actually heard of dinoflagellates.
Cyanobacteria is another problem. Okay. So there's just so many challenges, and there's just always so many hurdles that you need to overcome as a reef keeper. And like I said at the beginning, I've been doing this for 27 years, and I still have not figured everything out. Hey, Chris, man, thanks for ACI Aquaculture for that super chat there. All right, so what's Chris saying here?
Oh yeah, I have to ask the question.
All right,
Keith, what's your favorite part of reefing? It's good to hear you doing the talking. Yeah, thank God. Because I know nothing. Who is this? ACI Aquaculture.
Chris Meckley from ACI Aquaculture.
Yeah, Chris, clearly I know nothing about aquarium. So yes, let's keep the talking. Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. But challenges. So dinoflagellates, you've got a lot of invasives that you've got to sort of take care of. You got fish jumping out of the tank. You got to deal with that. Anything else before we move on to his question? Challenges?
That's it. you got to have a lot of patience in reef keeping because of all the issues that you could potentially face and all the hurdles that you have to kind of jump over. You got to be patient and you got to be in it for the long haul. It's not a hobby where you're in it for a couple of years and you're gonna. Some people achieve success after a couple of years, but it's not easy. You got to really put in your time and learn your lessons.
So you got to take the long view. You got to be resilient. I meant to ask you this before, but how long does it take you to grow a coral from a bone-cutted nub, if I may? I don't know if that's the right terminology, but yeah.
It depends on the coral. Some corals grow fast, so if you cut like a 1-inch frag of a Montipora, that could be 6 inches in 6 months. Okay. If you're doing things right.
Right.
Whereas if you you cut another coral like a Tyree Purple Monster is a coral that is a real old school coral that I have in my tank, and it's a notoriously slow grower, and perhaps that might grow 1/4 of an inch in a year or something.
That's amazing.
But a lot of times what happens is these corals will encrust on the rock before they start growing up, and sometimes you have to kind of wait out that stage of the process.
So is that a good thing when they encrust on the rock? Or?
Yes.
Because they're taking root.
But at times, sometimes they encrust too much. And you can try to do some things to accelerate growth upwards, which is, if there's a little bit of a nub, you could try to snip it off, and that potentially could jumpstart a coral growing vertically.
It's amazing. So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to Chris's question.
What's my favorite?
I would say favorite parts, because I'm guessing there's more than one element of reefing that I love that term. I love that action verb, reefing. So what do you like about it?
I think it's the satisfaction of having that success. It's like I mentioned, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, and so I think when you can plant when you start off, probably the most satisfying thing for me is starting off with a new reef tank, having a blank slate and planting a bunch of frags. Right, so you got a bunch of 1-inch pieces or whatnot that are all planted on the rocks. The rewarding part for me is like after a couple of years, seeing that reef grow in and mature. That's really the big reward is seeing something that doesn't really look too natural at the beginning because you got a lot of rock and you got a lot of sand perhaps and a lot of open space, and then after 2 or 3 years, boom, you got a full reef. I mean, this reef behind us. Probably 95% of the rock that's facing the light is covered with corals. Wow. When it started out, I would say maybe 5% of the rock was covered with coral.
It's amazing. So you're literally you're literally breathing life into being underwater. And it takes a while. That's amazing.
Right. I mean, with my new Peninsula tank, I just planted frags, over the last few months. And now I need to sit back, relax, and keep my hands out of the tank and stop fiddling because the more you fiddle with coral, the slower it's going to grow.
Yeah. So it's a dance, really. I mean, you don't want to be too.
The patient people win out.
Yeah. So helicopter parents, snowplow parents, this is not for you. Yeah. And if you're into instant gratification, all of you people on TikTok and Snapchat. You got to rethink this. If you're going to get into reefing, did I use that term right?
Yes.
Reefing, you have to be patient.
So Chris Meckley says, laugh out loud. He's usually the one asking the questions and fighting to get a word in. Glad you're here too, Rob.
Chris, I'm just holding it down tonight.
David Waters says, only reefers know how hard it is and how many things have to be right to have success. Right on, man. Yeah,
I love
for
that.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't realize that there was such a. You really have to cultivate patience. You have to cultivate. I mean, there's a lot of. Well,
let me ask you a question.
Well, yes.
I'm sorry to turn the tables here because you're the host. But what passions are you involved with, or what projects are you involved with that requires patience?
Well, that's a good question. At the risk of being political, maybe I shouldn't answer that question. However,
we got my wife that's moderating the chat, so
I will say,
if it gets snarky, then she can handle it.
Well, so common ground. I would say that reefing sounds somewhat akin to raising children, because you have to be patient. The process is full of surprises. I imagine it's a steep learning curve, reefing, that maybe gets a little less steep as the more you know, but you're always going to sort of pick up new things. And there is, and this is what I like best about it so far with our conversation, is I really like it that reefing demands patience and resilience. Like you have to be willing to sort of go with the flow, dare I say, which seems like a good reefing metaphor.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing. I feel like I'm learning a lot. Where do you see, I have two more questions for you. Where do you see the future of the industry going?
That's a really good question, because there's a lot of controversial things going on in terms of collection.
I bet your live chat audience has some thoughts about the future of the industry.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and I think. Well, let's. I'll give you an example. In Hawaii right now, fish collecting is been halted. So fish like a yellow tang before the ban used to cost I don't know, $30 or $40. And that was a fish that was only collected out of Hawaii. Now I think the going rate for a wild collected yellow tang might be $250, $300. Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong on that. But so that's one area where things have changed a lot, and there's lobbyists out there that are completely against the hobby, but of course the hobby itself has lobbyists. And I'm not in tune with the politics of all that, but there are definitely some threats. There's some threats in terms of coral imports being cut off, but like I said, it's key to be able to have a the home aquarist and other coral vendors out there and coral farms out there to be able to aquaculture what we already have imported.
And would the reason to be opposed to importing coral or fish from, say, Hawaii, is that collectors would go out and harvest the wild stuff, and that would put those? Is that
right?
Am I getting that right?
Right.
And what would be the counter argument would be that if you can cultivate a global interest in coral and fish, then perhaps you could elevate collective human consciousness around both the reef and the fish.
Right, and there are efforts ongoing to captive raise fish. So the yellow tang that I talked about, those are being captive raised right now. So you can you could buy those that are raised outside of the ocean in some sort of facility that raises the.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a both and scenario, kind of wild and domestic, rather than a either or. Fascinating. So my last question for you, and this is sort of speaking to this is part of our Plan VTV Vermont Entrepreneurs series. So we've interviewed entrepreneurs here in the Green Mountain State, the once and future Republic of Vermont, we like to say, who are following their passion and investing their money and energy, life energy, to make money and pursue their goals and interests. What do you see? What do you hope for the future of ReefBum? And let me say that I remember when you and I first started talking about this as a business opportunity, this beautiful, right, full of fish and coral, as a business opportunity, and I was in a little bit of disbelief only because I didn't know much about aquariums or this industry. But you've been at this for a while. I mean, you've written a book. You're talking with people all over the world. What do you see for the future of ReefBum?
I just want to continue what I'm doing. I have the YouTube channel, and I do this weekly live stream, and it's very educational for me, and I get some great feedback from the viewers that it's very educational for them. So it's I'm just sharing my journey via the YouTube channel and via my blog on my website. And I'm just passing along what I've learned from my experiences. And if I could help reef keepers along the way, I think that's a great thing. But I learn something new pretty much every day in this hobby, and I think that's an awesome thing. And I think that's the reason why a lot of us are been in this hobby for a very, very long time. It's humbling, Yeah. You think you got it all figured out.
Yeah.
And then something will kind of like knock you off your, knock you off your socks, and you could have a tank crash for some reason.
You could have a wrasse jump out of the tank.
You could have something jump out of something.
That would have freaked me.
Yeah.
Out. Yeah. So Chris says here, the biggest struggle with coral farming is running out of space.
Yeah.
And Chris, I assume you're talking about in the wild, if I may.
He's talking about, I've actually visited Chris down in Plant City, Florida, and he has a coral farm facility there, and he's constantly expanding that facility to try to keep up with the demand for the product.
And where in Florida did you say?
Plant City.
Where's that?
That is near Tampa Bay, I believe, right, Chris? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so Gulf side. Okay, yeah. And our UK has a really insightful observation. Aquaculture is the future of not only the hobby, but also could be the only future of some of the creatures we keep if we continue to destroy their natural habitats. Yeah, so there's an interesting dance between the wild and, I don't know if domestic is the right word, domesticated, but really.
Tank raised.
Tank raised, yeah. Well, Keith, this has been fantastic. I feel like we should end the show with me speaking Hawaiian, because I speak Hawaiian. I fell in love with coral and reef fish when I lived in Hawaii back in my early 20s after college. It was my very first teaching job, and I left New England, I left New York to travel 6,000 miles to the beautiful coral reefs and the tropical fish of Hawaii. And the Hawaiian state fish, as I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers would know, is the triggerfish.
Yes. Can you pronounce that?
But who can say it in Hawaiian? Oh, I can. The triggerfish in Hawaiian would be the humu humu nuku nuku apua'a.
Wow.
Which means fish with a nose shaped like a pig. The humu humu nuku nuku apua'a. And that is for all my friends in Hawaii. Aloha, mahalo for listening. And Hawaii and coral reefing is no ka'oi, which means number one. It's good, huh? Yeah. So this has been awesome. Any last things you want to share with our audience? Any questions I have not asked you before we start?
I'm just perusing the chat here for any final comments or questions.
Do you believe there's any
risk
we reefers could someday go extinct? What an interesting question. Yeah, that's from Reef and Dive.
I can only talk from my personal point of view. I don't know if I could ever see myself getting out of this hobby. The only thing that would inhibit me would be old age and not being able to make it down the stairs to the basement or something.
Well, as long as you're skiing and biking and running and doing all the things.
I think I can make it down the stairs.
I was going to say, I'm not worried. I think you got another 50 years on you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, keep the fish alive. Good. There it is. Yeah.
Reef and Dive, yeah.
Yeah, the humu humu, nuku nuku apua. Very good. Yeah. It's a beautiful fish, too. Slightly awkward looking, but in sort of an elegant sort of way. And I used to dive with him on the reefs for a couple of years, and I really miss that, actually. Vermont is, of course, spectacular. Not a lot of coral reef diving.
No.
Except in your basement.
Well, we could potentially arrange that to where be a tourist attraction here.
I think tours, yeah. Well, Keith, this has been amazing.
Rob, I really enjoyed this, man.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks for swinging by.
Yeah, of course. So good. And thanks to Ginger on the production and Mr. Wilson on the floor. I think we finally wore out your dog. Yeah. Well, should I do our sign off?
Yeah.
All right. You've been watching Plan VTV, the show about Vermont independence, where every citizen is an entrepreneur and every entrepreneur is a citizen. Our special guest tonight in his own basement, where the aquarium and the fish and the coral are, has been Keith Berkelhamer. It's such a pleasure to see Keith in his native habitat. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, V for Vermont.
Rob, man, this was awesome. We're still going on the live stream here on the Rappin With ReefBum. I'll just look at any more comments going through here, but I do want to also again thank the show's sponsors, Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine, for supporting the show. And thank you folks again for tuning in. That's my book.
Shout out to the book if you haven't.
Shout out to the book.
It looks really awesome.
So my next show is going to be Thursday, October 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the regular time. And on that show, I'm going to have Matthew from My First Fish Tank and BRS. So I think that's going to be a really, really awesome show, and hope you guys will tune in. Until then, be safe, be well. Later. Right.